panel for stirring up some passion. We'll see if we can continue that here because we have a topic that over the years has stirred some passionate debate and continues to do so. And we have an experienced panel of folks to guide us through that discussion and debate. Always friendly, I'm sure. So just to kick off with some brief introductions, I'm Eric Kirby. I'll be moderating the panel. I'm the CEO of Connection Engine, and we're an email intelligence and targeting platform. So, Jordan?
Hey, I'm Jordan Cohen. I'm Vice President of Business Development at Pontiflex. We're a mobile sign-up ad platform, so what that means is that we serve ads in between when you're on a game or listening to Pandora, in between levels or different songs, and instead of trying to get you to click to a website or get you to download an app, the call to action is sign up for somebody's email list. So as simple as that. And I've been in the email space since 2003, starting at the DMA when we were lobbying for the Can't Spam Act. We were operating in a lawless world, so I think it's going to hopefully be applicable to some of what we're talking about today.
I'm Andrew Kordek. I'm the co-founder and chief strategist for Trendline Interactive, and we're a strategic email marketing agency, and I've been in email since 2000.
My name is Bonnie Malone. I'm the Director of Response Consulting at ReturnPath.
I'm Suzanne Shaughnessy. I work with strategic accounts and partnerships at Fresh Address.
Great. So let's start just with a brief definition of what we're talking about when we say email append, just so everybody's on the same page. So we're talking about a list growth tactic where a marketer has a list of customers or prospects where they have names and physical addresses. They provide that list to a third-party service provider who offers email append services. That service provider matches a database that they maintain against those names and physical addresses, and they apply email addresses that they have available for those individuals to that record. They then typically send out some kind of a permission message, mostly opt-out, that says, hey, so-and-so would like to communicate with you via email. If you're not interested, opt out. Occasionally opt in. Once that process is complete, they then provide those email addresses back to the marketer, and the marketer then makes decisions about how to add those addresses to their file for their email communications. So that's the quick definition. So quick audience poll, show of hands, and be honest. In your current role or in previous roles, how many of you have tested or used in any form email append services? So I'd say that is a third to half of the room. So it's been pretty broadly applied in this room. And as the topic, I think, was called up here, good, bad, or other. So let me just get a pulse of the room. How many people had good and positive and say that it's a good thing to do? Okay, so I don't know, a few. How about the other side? Bad, had bad experiences. Similar, maybe a few more. How many would have sort of the other or it depends kind of an answer? That's probably the majority. So some good, some bad, maybe a couple more in bad in the room, but most people were sort of in that other it depends category. Okay, so let's see what the panel has to say. So to start us off, part of what stirred up this debate, again, recently, even though people have been employing email append tactics for over a decade now, is the fact that one of the long-term sort of providers of the service in various ways, Experian Cheetah Mail, came out at the beginning of this year and said that they were no longer recommending or approving or supporting email append as an offering. And so when you have somebody that's been doing it for a long time and is in the data business come out and say that they no longer support it, it gets people talking about it and asking questions again. So Experian Cheetah Mail said it's not okay to do, so I'll ask the panel, is it okay to do, and who wants to start with that? Jordan.
Sure. It's not really okay to do. And Cheetah Mail didn't make that. Thank you. No, Cheetah Mail didn't make that decision lightly, and it wasn't just for morally virtuous reasons. It was largely for economic ones. I think that a lot of marketers aren't that interested in doing it much more, or as much as they used to back in the day. At the end of the day, what's driving everything is a lot of it's deliverability. The reality is that, so I guess a little over a year ago, MOG, it's one wonderful organization, MOG, the Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group, they're effectively the direct marketing association of the ISP world, the folks that are receiving and processing your mail. they issued a statement effectively outlawing it. They said email appending is an abusive practice, it is spamming, it is not something that we find acceptable, and you should block marketers that email append. Now, the law in the United States is the bar was set very low. I mentioned at the beginning that I used to work at the DMA, and one thing that the DMA is really good at is lobbying and making sure that the laws are very conducive to marketers doing whatever they want. But while the law might allow you to email folks without permission, and by that I mean people who didn't affirmatively opt into your email list, who didn't sign up and say, I want to hear from you, it's irrelevant. Gmail, Google, Yahoo, let's forget about AOL, Hotmail, they are not what's known as common carriers. They're not the Postal Service. They have no obligation whatsoever to deliver your mail. So if an organization like MOG, which represents all of the networks out there, issues a statement that says that email append is wrong, that's the law. So at the end of the day, the real question is, for marketers who do email appends, do you want to break the law? Or are you going to play by the rules? Now, now, a lot of people break the law and get away with it. There are, there are ways to not get arrested, right, if you've broken the law. But the number one way not to get arrested is not to break the law in the first place. So, yeah, the real answer is email appends. In today's world, it's just, this is the commercial reality. They are bad news, and they could either get you in jail or at least get a lot of points on your license against you and stick with you for a long time. So,
Andrew.
Who here thinks that MOG is the law? Thank you very much. So I think that email appends, first of all, I think that email appends can work if done correctly. And as a strategic email marketing agency that I own, it wouldn't be the first recommendation that I would have. In fact, I've never recommended E-Appends, in part because a lot of companies today look at E-Appends as a free, cheap, easy way to grow their database, when in fact I think if done correctly, and I've got several case studies around this, could actually be pretty profitable. But most companies today want that cheap, free, quick, and easy hit to increase their, acquisition efforts.
Well, I think it's a whole quantity versus quality question in that regard, and that, if your goal is to add a lot of names to your file really quickly and not so much have an engaged database of subscribers that are going to be brand advocates and active within your program, then perhaps that might be something you want to investigate. But if you really are invested in long-term success of your program and your relationship with subscribers, then starting it off with a non-permissioned way of acquisition is not the route to go.
But I'll put you on the spot. Is it okay to do?
I don't think so. Okay. It's not a non-permissioned way of acquiring email addresses, even though it might be a way of finding a loophole within canned spam. If you have an existing relationship with that subscriber, it's not morally, ethically the right thing to do.
But we're not here to talk about a morality debate. We're here to talk about business, and actually it goes on. And in fact, a good portion of the people here have done it. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of people here who have done it to various degrees of success. So I don't think we should focus on specifically the morality of the issue. I think we should focus on how can we make this practice, which is very well known, and most of us have done it in the room, better.
Suzanne?
Well, I think one thing that's kind of interesting is to think of it not so much as a list growth strategy, but to think of it as an engagement strategy or a retention strategy. Because when it does work, when it's done right, it's typically done with a donor database, a customer database, people with whom you have a relationship. If you're trying to do prospects, it's just not going to work. They're not going to engage with your brand. If you are doing something with a database of people who are engaged with you in other channels, then you're going to see good ROI if you carry through and do a very respectful program.
Oh, and I think, sorry, just to your point, the if is the big factor, I think, there, is that we're saying if a marketer does it right, if they handhold the process, if they make extra strides and efforts to engage with the subscribers, and the fact of the matter is most people don't do that. They don't go to the links that we're describing here to engage with those subscribers they're acquiring through E-Append. They're just slapping them on the list and adding them to the file, and that is the wrong thing to do.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, it's so treacherous. I mean, we have this thing. I'm from New York City, and we have this thing going on down there that you might have heard of called the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they like to say that they're the 99% and they're up against the 1%. And really, there may be the fringes at the bell curve. That 1%, I think it's more like 0.1%. That they have everything is in order. Their entire marketing program, not just email, is so slick, and they have the time and the resources to really think it through and again kind of break the law and not get caught. But for the 99% out there, it is just a recipe for disaster. And Andrew asked if everybody believes that MOG's the law and nobody raised their hand. Fine. I forgot to mention during my opening comments. You know who else the law says that you can't do email appends? That title sponsor up there, ExactTarget. It's in their terms of service. They don't just say you can't buy lists. They specifically mention appends. There are dozens of email service providers that will fire you as a client. That's one of the only things. It's kind of unique to our space in email marketing, where your vendor will walk away from you. They will say, "We don't want your money because you were going to destroy our network. We have 150 people." Well, Bob, you are the 0.001%. You were on the bell curve, man. You were rocking it, and you could send you have that budget to send to all those inactives as well. So bless you, man. But again for the 99%, no, your ESP, Bronto, Silverpop, ExactTarget, Blue Hornet, they outlaw it. They will walk away from you. There are some ESPs that will, after you send out your email append permission pass 2-3 times, they might let you add it, and start pushing those messages, but not on their network. So before you do an append, you got to worry about MOG, and then you also got to, before you do it, make sure that it's okay and legal according to your own ESP if you want to continue using them.
Tell me
Has
one
any ESP in the audience fired a client that you want to share a story about? Is this just a hypothetical?
I guess
hypothetical?
my question, I think, to everybody else here is, Cheetah put out, the release that they, are against E-Appends. Has any ESP publicly come out and supported that or issued a press release around that since that time?
Cheetah Mail.
Other than Cheetah Mail.
They didn't have to because it was already outlawed in their terms of service. Cheetah Mail was the exception.
I'm from Cheetah Mail. Hi. I'm fairly certain Responses already had that stance before we did, and perhaps we were a little late to the game, and I'm happy to, join the forum here. But, I think we did this mainly to protect our clients, and thank you, Jordan, for defending that. I'm happy to speak more about that, but I don't want to take away from your panel.
Yeah.
I'm from Experian Cheetah Mail.
Yeah, something else that Cheetah Mail said when they took that position. Sorry, Ben Isaacson, who's their privacy leader, and he's a great dude. He's really smart. He's been in the industry since the late 90s. He was the founder of the Association for Interactive Marketing. I mean, he knows this stuff better than anybody in this room, and there are a lot of smart people in this room. But I will say that he's one of the smartest guys I know. When he issued that statement, it wasn't just about MOG and all of that, but something that I really loved about his position was, he said, you know what, like 10 years ago, when big offline companies like Dell and had these massive postal files and were kind of struggling to get the email addresses that were at that level, that was kind of what the driving force was behind it. But he said it's 2012. Our consumers are not children. Our customers are not dummies. If you don't know how to get on an email list that you want to be on today, you shouldn't be on it. He said, we live in an age where there are so many opportunities to get on an email list. 10 years ago, you had to schlep to your office or your home and find a computer, and then go through that onerous process of going to somebody's website and finding their opt-in form and opting in. Now you could text to opt in when you're on when you're in the airport. You might be playing, listening to Pandora and see one of our company's ads. At the cash register, at any retail store that's worth something, the Container Store, Pier 1, all those guys. As soon as you buy something, sir, could I have your email address? I mean, there are ample opportunities. And when you're talking about appends, which is to, you're trying to get the email address of an existing customer, these are people who know you. They know your brand. If they want to opt into your email, if they really want to engage with you by email, they have ample opportunities to do so, and that was a key part of that position
And
statement.
if people wanted your catalog, they would ask you for it without you just having to send it to them too, right?
Yeah, and sorry, just 2 more points. I do want to say after we came out with that release that the ISPs and MOG and, they really supported it. They thanked us for coming out with that.
Of course they would.
And also, I do want to say it isn't in our, like Exact Target, it's not in our kind of terms and conditions or rules with our clients. We can't physically or legally tell our clients not to do appends. What we can do is help them do it smarter. We do have a lot of clients who are extremely dependent on appends, and we're just working with them on trying to be smarter, making sure that they're not getting blocked, making sure they're not hitting spam house. That's the last thing we want to happen.
So let's talk about that for a moment. I think, Jordan, one of your arguments is that only 1% of the people in this room are smart enough to do it right, to paraphrase.
Have the time or resources to make it worthwhile to invest in that versus the zillions of other things that they could do that are more productive. That's
so then I think that, so we can sort of think about it as a spectrum, right? So there's probably an absolutely wrong way to go about it. There's the other side of the spectrum where, I guess you could say that it's never right under any circumstances. But it sounds like there are certain types of approaches, methodologies, and so forth that are more right than others, right? So let's talk about that for a moment. So if you do want to apply this tactic in some way in your business, what are the considerations and what are some of the things that are the right way to do it? And Suzanne, I might ask you to start on this one.
I mean, I think I already mentioned you really want to already start with people who are engaged with your brand. So you want to make sure that that's a customer or donor or subscriber list that you're working with. Do make sure that you are doing the match in an appropriate way. For a lot of marketers, that's an individual match where you're matching against first name, last name, postal address. That's pretty simple. Household match is also available, and for some marketers that's successful, but it's something that you really need to think about. Then you need to make sure that you have a list that's pretty well hygiened and pretty well that has undergone an initial permission pass for deliverability. So that's, kind of a very high-level bar to look for. And then on the other side, so that's the provider side. That's kind of, where I'm working. But the other side is just be respectful. And all of your email marketing programs probably should take that into consideration as well. You need to be respectful of your recipients. So, what your cadences are on your normal marketing program, ease these new people, newly appended people into it, make it very easy for them to opt in if they haven't already done it in the initial pass, or opt out and engage, of course, click through and buy. So I know other people have other things to add.
Yeah, so there's kind of the best practices around, the way you go about the append itself, then there's the best practices about what you do with those new email addresses in terms of how you introduce them to your program. So any additional comments on either side of that equation?
I think it boils down to systematically getting them onto your list and then systematically onboarding them. There's historically, companies would do a one email opt-out and then dump them into the database and start sending promotional email. I think there's something to be said for how you get them. Once you get them, either it's a two-step opt-out or a two-email opt-out, and then maybe reduce and not send them any email for the first 2 weeks of the relationship, get them used to you, get them to opt out, send them special types of emails, because those first 2, 3, 4 weeks of that relationship, I think, is extremely important. And I think if you do it systematically, and there's a case study around this that we worked with a client, again, we never recommended the E-Append. We walked in this scenario where they were doing these E-Appends. They did it systematically, and historically over that 1 year, they made $1 million. Their opt-out rate and their spam complaint rate was lower than that of their organics. So that's an isolated story. I know somebody would say, well, gosh, Andrew, that's an isolated story. But you know what? Look up the video of the Sasquatch Music Festival in 2009. There was one guy dancing. And when one guy starts to dance and everyone starts to dance together and they start to do it right, then people can learn from that.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually working with a client that has a complete opposite situation. Again, you know, an E-Append was nothing we ever recommended, but they did on their own in December. They're an insurance provider. They have a lot of data about their customers and didn't have email address for many. So they did the E-Append, they began mailing them, and 4 months later, we're still in cleanup mode after a 20% drop in inbox delivery rates, unknown users through the roof. There've just been one problem after the other that we're still, again, recovering from because of that decision that they made. So there's a lot of longer-term repercussions that need to be taken into consideration as well, because it can be hugely damaging to your brand and your overall strategy as well.
I think, you know, if you're going to do it, you know, step one would be make sure that you are with a wonderful vendor and supplier of the data. And as we all know, I mean, we're here in Florida, wonderful place for finding good, clean customer data from some very reputable brokers on the other side of the state that you could meet. So step one, you have to have that perfect, squeaky clean data. You want to audit where did it come from? Is it from, like, you know, some other retail brand that's participating in some kind of data co-op, or is it people that are opting in on, you know, some kind of, like, you know, you're going to win a free iPad site, and now that's their data. How old is the data? Did people because it's always opt-in. People have opted into the Append. You know, did they opt in a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? We just talked on the last panel about, you know, that's ISPs. I know we hate it. It sucks, but it's happening. ISPs convert inactive addresses into spam traps. So verifying the data. So you got to make sure that the data is perfect. Part two, you have to find a sucker to send it out on your behalf, because your ESP isn't going to do it for you. So finding somebody's infrastructure that isn't tainted, that hasn't been flagged already as a spam source, push the pass through there, right? Three, so no fresh address. Also, we should release a little bit after Cheetah Mail that they are no longer doing opt-out email appending. So what they mean by that is the first message to the recipient, they actually have to opt in. The message has to be, you know, hey, you are on our mail file or whatever. We want to start sending you email. Please click here to opt in, and if you don't, we're not going to send you any more email. But the vast majority of appends and the way that the industry has been operating for the almost 10 years that I've been in it, it's opt-out append. The brokers of the append will recommend to their customers to have a non-response mechanism in the email. They try to make that first message fly beneath the radar as much as possible. Andrew sent a note out. I'm not going to publicly shame the marketer, but he forwarded a note to the Only Influencers list, and he goes, hey guys, what do you think of this email append that somebody did? There was no call to action in the message. At the very bottom, buried underneath, was an opt-out link if you wanted to opt out. They were trying to get people to subscribe to a print magazine. There wasn't even a link in there to subscribe to the magazine. There wasn't any way to buy anything in response to this email message. My response to the group was, because this message isn't supposed to work for the marketer, it's supposed to work for the guy who sold that data. He just wants to make sure that as few people as possible don't opt out. As my friend Delaquist will tell you, humans, what do you say? Their normal position is not to act. You know, the inertia, you know, 98% won't take any, they won't click, they won't open. That's what the append guy wants you to do. So in my experience, the folks that have made the most money out of email appends have been those guys on the southeast corner. Am I pointing in the right that way? I don't know.
But I think at that point in time, you can deal with a quality appender and a data folks. But ask them. I mean, we're in the day of age of negotiation, right? Ask them. You know what? What happens if some of these email addresses that I add to my database issue a spam complaint or opt out within the first 30 days of being on my list? Put your money where your mouth is, Mr. or Mrs. Data Appender, and let's make the determination. If you're so confident in your data, give us our money back if it's not going to happen. Pigs go to slaughter. Hogs live forever. You have to go in with that mantra to the data folks.
Somebody's tweeting that, I'm sure, right now. So, Della, do you want to?
Isn't this a case of you polled the audience, and most people have tried it, and there's probably this. If you take limited success or some success through to good success, it looks like 75% of the people who said they'd done it had got somewhere between limited to good success, and only 25% said they had really bad success. Isn't what's being said on the panel a case of making people who are achieving results with it feel icky about what they do by using such inflammatory language? Now, I know I do that too, but I try and do it to make people feel proud about their job. We're email marketers, right? Everyone here has done it, and you're making them feel like dirt at the moment. How do you respond to that?
Is that question for Jordan?
Can't be for me, yeah.
It's a question really to Jordan and Return Path, right? Because the thing is, Return Path can fix the problem. Their problem is they didn't come to you before they started doing it. If you're saying to me Return Path could not have helped them achieve their objectives, you shouldn't go to Return Path. I mean, the bottom line is you're good at that, and you could have helped them, and their mistake was not coming first to you first. Jordan's agenda I'm not sure about at all, apart from the fact that what you do is diametrically in competition with E-Append. That's the only reason I can see you would feel that way.
Okay, you guys. No,
Okay.
well,
that was a little below the belt, but that's okay. So.
No. Well, thank you, Della. Well, I do think at a. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Beyond my obvious hidden agenda, Della, I actually do. I work for a startup, and there are a lot of companies in New York, Silicon Alley, out on the West Coast, that are trying to create marketing solutions that address the realities of the world that we live in today, which is one where consumers are in control, where consumers have things like DVR, and they will fast forward through commercials that they find icky, where consumers have the do not call list and can register their phone numbers and say, you don't have the right to interrupt me. And you know what? A lot of marketers are very successful operating in that paradigm, in one where they respect that consumers are adults, are making their decisions, and most email marketers do that. My company is one of those companies that is, yes, admittedly, we are of the belief that the world is moving towards more consumer control, and that marketers need to be creative and interesting and relevant to be affirmatively welcomed into consumers' lives. And those that don't take that approach, not just in our little quirky corner of the marketing ecosystem here in email, but across the entire all the marketing channels that are out there, right? So we believe that permission is relevant across the board. But to answer your question about I'm not trying to shame anybody or make them feel icky. But again, forget email. If you are knowingly breaking the law, and we know that this is doctrine.
This is
what's
not
the-
a law.
what's
There is
the
no
law?
law against e-appending.
No,
let's,
there is
let's
no-
set this.
okay,
Let's
okay.
set the record straight right now.
All right, again.
Is there a law around e-appending that I'm not aware of?
Right, yeah. Again, it's called policy. So I'm
No,
using.
it's not. It's privacy. It's PIPEDA in Canada. It's the EU directive. It is illegal outside of the U.S.
Outside the U.S.
Right. But if you look, sorry guys, I'm Dennis Samey from Eloqua. But if you look at the FTC, right, in the last couple of weeks, and Jordan, you've seen this, they're now going after the data brokers and asking for them to be more transparent and giving control.
Right, but it's still not against the law.
Right. So the law is that's semantics. I'm using that as a there's a thing called policy, and the other part of the law that I brought up at the beginning is that ISPs are not common carriers. They have no legal obligation to deliver or not deliver your mail. They are able to set their own policies. It is their house that you are entering, and you have to play by their rules. That's what I call the law. So I'm saying law, guidelines, rules. It's a fact. Those are policies, and you could either play by the rules or you don't have to. The real analogy is driving, and you have a license, and there are some people don't like that there are speeding laws. Some people think it's cool to drive drunk. You know that you're going to get that you're risking it. There's a way to speed and not get caught. It's sad, but there's a way to people drunk drive and don't get caught, but eventually they do. And at best you get caught with you get a speeding ticket and you get a couple of points on your license. At worst, it's disastrous, and that's what you're doing when you append. So people do it, and you shouldn't feel. There's pressures, and I get that, but I think everybody who's done it has done it out of the pressure and the necessity, and kind of feels like, You know, I wish that there was a better way for me to do it, and I know that I'm also really playing with fire here, and there's a chance that I'm going to get on the spam house list, I'm going to get permanently blocked from Gmail, I'm going to possibly get my, whether it's an enterprise ESP or MailChimp, which will automatically suspend accounts that generate spam complaints of more than 0.1%, 1 in 1,000. So that's my answer to you, Della.
Hey, and Andrew. Hey, Jordan. It's Bob Frady over here.
God. All right.
Isn't privacy
Shouldn't you
a
two be
myth?
sitting together? What?
Isn't privacy a myth? I mean, Google knows more about you than your own mother does. So why are we talking about privacy and consumer control when our own industry has grown up to the point where data is ubiquitous about people?
Right. No, so that's a great point. There's always been, you know, there are two levels of privacy. There's the stuff that's going on in the background that consumers don't see or know about. No, and that's so, you know, I know Eric kind of wanted to talk also about just kind of appending things beyond email address. So you have an email address already, and you could append, you know, all you know is I'm Jordan, and my email address is jordan@Poniflex, right? You could also get, you know, what's my household income, how many kids do I have or not have, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that stuff's in the background. But the other level of the privacy is consumer-facing and the consumer bombardment thing. And that's what people really care about. People don't want to get telemarketing calls in the middle of dinner. They don't want to see an email from somebody that they didn't opt into in their already crowded inbox.
Guys, we're splitting hairs here over the morality and the privacy and the permission aspect. The purpose of this panel is let's celebrate the success and figure out a way for those people in the room that raised their hands to make this a better thing to do. It has to be done. I mean, people are going to continue to do it.
So, let's dig into that for the few minutes that we have left here. In addition, one quick comment. You know, we're zeroing in on a particular marketing tactic, but the reality is, if you take any marketing arena out there, search, which, you know, we talked a little bit about before, you know, various forms of other list growth tactics, such as forms of co-registration and so forth. We can talk about the bad ways to do those tactics and the bad actors in the space and probably have a similar conversation. It's just so that this topic has a bit more of a sort of distinctive lightning rod on one side of it. So just to kind of be fair, we could probably pick on any marketing tactic at some level. But with that, so, and to Andrew's point, give the audience a sense of what are some of the metrics that you could expect or associate with email append in terms of, you know, what would it cost, what would you expect to see in a return if you were following the best practices that I think everybody up here would agree with if you're going to approach it. Anybody want to share any metrics around what you would see? Maybe on the cost side or ballparks on that side?
I can tell you, if you do it right, it's not going to be pennies, but it's going to be probably much less than the cost of a postage stamp per deliverable matched email address. And the match rates might be anywhere between, I would say, 10% and 20%. That would be, again, deliverable email addresses. Those would not necessarily be the opt-ins. The opt-ins and the opt-outs would both be very low. The opens are very low. It's not, you know, when you do that first permission pass, it's not, you have to be kind of thinking about what you'll be able to do with people who didn't open and who didn't respond, and, you know, whether you can add them to your program. So I don't know, that kind of opened another can of worms beyond metrics, I guess.
Well, and Andrew, others, do you have any rules of thumb or metrics associated with how addresses on a file that were acquired via E-Append perform compared to other types of addresses?
I don't have anything specific in terms of numbers that I can't talk about, but I will say that it's going to, and I'm not going to use the word it depends. It's going to vary for how you do it from the back end to the front end and everything in between. So I think, again, if there's the way that you do it is going to long-term affect how those rates are going to be over the first year or over the next 24 months.
Right, so it's kind of back to what they had mentioned in the last session about resources being, you know, the number one issue. If you don't have the resources to put to the process, like we're, you know, talking about hand-holding it and being, you know, really selective and with the matches, what you're actually going to add to the database, and to avoid the deliverability problems that we see regularly with clients that do this, to, you know, earmark that data separately and be really intentional and really careful in babysitting and hand-holding the process as you're mailing them. which again, I don't think most people have the resources or bandwidth to do, that it just otherwise is going to be detrimental long term. So you really need to keep an eye on those key metrics, things like your unknown users, things like your inbox placement rates, specific to those segments as well, so that you can manage down the risk.
And I also think it's sometimes an all or nothing deal for everybody. We need to append 500,000 people into the database this year, Systematically do it. Do it in short bursts. Don't feel as if you have to go all the way all the time. I mean, test into it, be small and be smart about it.
I'll share one just quick number on this. In my experience, over the years, looking at different companies that have tried E-Append, and not always in the best way, so probably not following the kind of best practices that this panel recommend. Rule of thumb, an email appended name will perform at about half of the rate in terms of engagement and sales and so forth than a name that was more organically acquired to the list. That's just what I've seen across companies.
Yeah.
But do you find that the cost per acquisition of that name is significantly lower than the cost of the organically collected names?
Well, organically collected, it's a bit hard to compare because they typically come in through purchase transactions and so forth. But compared to other list growth tactics where people were spending on list acquisition, absolutely, it's much more cost effective, which is part of the reason why people have been drawn to E-Append over the years, because in the last couple of years, especially as companies like Groupon and others have really focused on acquisition tactics that are primarily pointed at growing their email list, there's a pretty good rule of thumb out of there in terms of what it takes to acquire a new subscriber, and some of those numbers have been public, and I got to tell you, those numbers are much, much higher per new subscriber than what E-Append would come in at.
And I think we can have the same debate on forced opt-ins. A lot of these sites now are forcing you in to do other, for their goods or their travel deals or whatever, especially around the group buying space. And to be quite honest, that could be an egregious practice of permission when you force them in to receive another email and don't even tell them about it, and then you have to go back and unsubscribe yourself from their preference center.
So you have another question over here.
Hi, Sarah Barber, and I'm from Yes Mail Info Group. We have seen the good, bad, and ugly, but I want to talk about the good just for a second. We do E-Appends for dozens of companies every month. And I would say dozens, I'm not going to say thousands. You have to do it well.
Yeah.
And it's like anything. You sit and you spend 1,000 emails to one person every day, it's not going to work anymore, right? So there's good ways to do something. And I think it was Andrew who made the comment that don't do it for 500,000 or your 14 million customers that you've acquired over the last 6 years and expect huge success. It's a way to be in contact with your customers. It's just like asking a pop under or the pop over. These people have engaged with your brand already, and it's a good way to do that. And you can do it consistently. There's programs that are out there where you can have you have a transaction, they have a transaction with your brand, a couple days later, they get an email that says, hey, you just were a customer of ours. Would you mind us being in contact with you via email? Because it's convenient, because it's easy, because we want to make life easy for you. We care.
There are companies out there now that are using these e-receipts as a way to force people to opt in. Would you like to receive your receipt via email? And you say, oh, absolutely, I'd love to get that. And the next thing you know, you start getting promotional email. So how is that any different from appending?
So I guess my point is that, yes, there's a bad way to do there's a bad way to drink and get behind the wheel, and there's a bad way to do E-Append.
And there's a good way to drink and get behind the wheel?
Exactly.
Right, okay. Well,
I'd like to know what that is. But,
well, okay, so one glass of wine, everybody want to make but my point is that, right, I'm on a roll. My point is that you can't ace the entire practice out because of some people doing it poorly, or some companies doing it poorly in the name of making a big data sale. It's not about the data sale, it is about connecting with the customer.
All right.
So, one quick question. And I'm surprised we're talking about this at the end of the presentation. If email is about permission, then why are we even talking about this program? We all sit around and say email's not dead. We all sit around and say email's alive, and we all have respect for the customer, and we start with permission. You are ignoring permission in this approach.
Anybody want to respond?
Well, I'll say I think we're talking about marketing, and I think we are, again, talking about customers. We're talking about retention and engagement. So it's really a matter of asking for that permission to people who are already engaged. And their re-engagement through email, or they're opting into programs, is that permission. And so I think that in a good Append program, that should be the goal, is getting an overt permission. But I do think that in the meantime, it's marketing, and the meek marketers are not the ones who are going to inherit the earth.
I agree that it's about permission, Ryan, and I don't think any of us, I agree that it's about permission, email's about, but there's nothing wrong with asking for permission.
Without permission.
Send the email and say, if you want to get this email, click this button and opt in. But most marketers will say, do nothing and we will opt you in. So that's the lazy way, because they assume the consumer's not going to respond. If you want to do an E-Append the right way, put them on there, send the email and say, hey, you've done business with us before, would you like to receive emails? Click this button to receive an email. Otherwise, we're going to opt you out.
No, Ryan, the only reason we're having this conversation is because we've been debating about it lately. And no, there is there's a persistent tension between the old school direct mail database marketing practices that kind of, were the progenesis of email marketing, and the new school digital marketing, consumer control, permission. So that's what I think that's what's driving it. There's this notion that, well, it's worked in the past, 10, 15 years ago when it came to mail and, just appending things and sending things to people without their permission. And there's that tension that we're all still trying to sort out of, the marketing metrics and the data, and treating people as email addresses instead of people. And then there's a part of the community that is treating email addresses as people. There's people sitting behind those email addresses, and we have to, again, kind of embrace that things have changed. The world has moved our cheese, and are we going to move with it, or are we going to fight against it? And that's what we're debating about.
Morgan, are we out of time, or do we
Keep it going for a little bit. As long as we get it, let's get to
okay.
wrapping up kind of what some of the thoughts are. Because one question I have is more around like we put permission as the absolute top of the pedestal, and I think the question is, do we put where does value come in and play, right? So if nobody has to, I don't have to give anybody permission for a company to say, hey, you know what? Here's $100, right? If you give me something that is highly valuable, you don't need to get my permission first. The question is can we deliver really strong value? Do you have to get permission for that first? So that's something that I think you can go back and forth on, but.
So maybe last question then? Okay.
I'm sorry. I think this might actually kind of be a good concluding question, but it seems like a lot of the E-Append argument boils down to the quantity versus quality, opt-out versus opt-in nature of email and list in general. And I keep wondering, and I'd like to ask everybody in the room, and if you don't feel comfortable answering, I would like to hear from you, privately, offline, and the panel. Is the pressure to grow your list so great and do you get the payoff high enough from doing Append that it's worth it? Or is this basically a slowly dying practice?
So maybe on that question, since it's sort of an open question, at the beginning we asked how people viewed the good, bad, depends spectrum. Has anybody's view changed one way or the other based upon the discussion here today? Raise your hand if your opinion changed one way or the other. So you're all stuck in your ways. You're not learning.
Progress.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time. So Morgan, should we wrap up?
I think we're going to wrap this one up.
Okay.
Feel free at lunch activities on the boat. I'm sure that this would be wonderful conversation.
Thank you, panel.